Hey everybody, it's Georgia Stull, and I saw that I had a shout out for my super easy method to do crosshatch over a large area. It can look simple, but it can be very frustrating if you just try to set it up and do it. So I have a little trick and it works. First thing I do is create a boundary of my quilting space. I'm going to do this in repeat patterns. You'll understand why in a minute. And then I look for a pattern that more than fills my space from right to left. You see how it can extend over both sides? That's important because if I get a pattern and it's too small, let's move this over and say, well, this one's too small. If I try to use this arrow, then the pattern also gets deeper and I may not have enough quilting space. Don't shortchange yourself because as the quilt rolls up on the pickup bar, you will lose some of your available space. If I use this, the wedge, it doesn't make it any longer, which is good, except it changes the shape of the crosshatch. So that's not acceptable. Always use a pattern bigger than your space. And here we go, repeat patterns. And remember, I want it slightly outside the space on the sides. So I'm going to click right here and one repeat goes on and you can see that it is bigger on both sides. So I don't need additional repeats. I'm going to lock this and give myself 2 additional rows. And you can see they're all lined up. It doesn't matter how long your quilt is. You'll see that in a minute. And I'm going to say, okay. So I have 3 repeats, one of which fills my space on both sides. And if I want to move things around, just use your arrows. Like maybe if I want the edges right on the little piece right here, it doesn't matter. Just grab them all and move them. Now take your first repeat, do fill inside. And there it is, and you're going to stitch it. I'm working in standalone mode, so I'm going to toggle it as sewn since I'm not actually stitching. Now I would use roll quilt, but obviously in standalone I don't have roll quilt. So I will simulate it by moving, and I can line it up with the row above, and I would have a partial amount, obviously, of the row above because that would be my reference point. So now I have one more repeat and another repeat. If I stitch this repeat right now, these points, by the time I get to the 5th point, are going to start being misaligned. It won't match up to the row above. And that's because of shrinkage, and there's no real way to stop that. I'm just going to do a little trick, which is take this 3rd repeat, and if I bring it up, see there's where the second one, it matches that. And if I go down and match the next square, do you see how these sides aren't lined up? That won't work. So I need to go down one more square until the sides are all lined up with the one underneath. That's important, okay? Scroll in tight, like I'm going to do right now, and line it up as perfect as you can. There you go. It's lined up on the sides, and I have another one in place. See, this pattern is underneath. That's the one I use to line it up, delete it. And I know this sounds crazy, but now what I want you to do is take this and do a fill, and then fill inside, and then I want you to stitch it, okay? So we're going to toggle it as sewn. Now the next part, you have to envision that I'm at the head of my machine, and I'm going to choose draw line from my head, and I'm not going to do it with the mouse. I am here because I'm not on my machine, but you're going to do this with the head of your machine, and you are going to have stitched points here. You're not looking at the CAD screen, you're on your quilt. And when you get done, you'll think these don't line up, but they will. So what you're going to do is create a W from this point to this point. And I promise you, it might not look that great here because I'm not being as careful and I'm not exactly on a quilt point, but it works, I promise you. You won't even be able to tell the difference. So what I do is do draw line and every other point. See how I'm catching every other point like that? And let's pretend I've gone all the way across and I go ahead and stitch it. Then I come back the other way. You can go either direction, it doesn't matter, but I pick the other point and I'm clicking on the actual points of where these are stitched on my quilt. And I'm telling you, what happens is, even though this pattern next to this pattern would look misaligned, would stitch misaligned, and this is probably slightly misshaped, it doesn't look like it. It looks perfect every time. And you just continue that till you get to the bottom of your quilt, however many times it takes, and do a fill at the bottom if you have, you know, extra pattern at the bottom. I hope you find this to be helpful. Happy quilting!